Alright, and we are live. So, what would you say would be your main critique of ancap?
Sure. Uh, well, I think the thing in the document that we talked about originally was just like law enforcement, right? So, uh, to my understanding, a lot of the foundation behind ANCAP ideology is that it's not acceptable to violate people's rights, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, so I think that we can put forth that a government system without law enforcement is open to a lot of rights violations.
Okay, well, I mean, what do you mean by government there?
So if we live in a society where there is no organization set up to enforce the laws, so for example, to stop people from being murdered or stolen from or something, then the likelihood of someone being murdered or stolen from it probably goes up significantly.
Yeah, I'd accept that. If there's nobody enforcing the law, then the law is unlikely to be adhered to that much.
Sure, and then the other thing that I would say is if we do have someone enforcing the law, it is also very likely that eventually people are going to have their rights violated. Um, because I think by its nature, law enforcement tends to be something violent. So, for example, if we have someone who's holding up a convenience store or robbing a bank or breaking into someone's house, usually the only means by which these people can be stopped is the threat of violence. And eventually the carrying out of that threat. So, and then of course,
Do you have
those
bad
people
connection or
then
something?
be
You're going a little
detained
bit
against their will. They'll
robotic.
be placed in prison, whatever. Oh,
Yeah, your
sorry
voice
about
is
that.
kind of going a little weird. Do you have like a limited connectivity or something?
Not really. Sorry, just give me one sec. I'll switch devices and see if that works better.
All right,
Can you can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but like it's very stuttery.
Okay. Sorry, give me one moment. I'm just going to switch over to another device and I'll see if that works a little better.
Alright, so right now he's trying to sort his audio. So hopefully that won't take too long. How's everyone doing today? I say everyone. Literally just Mickey at the moment. Is that you back then?
Working on it. Can you hear me better now?
No, still. Oh my god.
Okay. Sorry, one moment.
I had this with another guy. I don't know what's causing it.
Hmm.
I'll tell you what it might have been. I had my I was mining Ethereum in the background, so that might
Mm.
have. Yeah, so now you sound better. So yeah, that was on my end.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. So yes, if you have some organization enforcing the law, it's likely that people will have their rights violated because law enforcement tends to be violent, right? That was the point. Was that the point? You there? Um,
Oh, okay, now we're good.
there we go.
Yeah, so there's two factors, which is one that law enforcement uh tends to be violent, right? And then the second thing is that that violence tends to be applied uh only to a certain group of people who we believed with some level of certainty are like criminals who deserve that violence applied to them. However, our process for discovering who is and is not a criminal is not 100% effective. So statistically, if our law enforcement agencies govern a large enough body of individuals, so long as we're not 100% effective at distinguishing criminals from innocent people, at some point an innocent person will have the force of law enforcement violently applied to them, which I think you and me can probably agree would be a violation of their rights, right?
Yeah, but I mean, this
Okay.
doesn't even seem like a critique of ancap specifically, because this is in every system you're going to have rights violations. The question is, how best do you deal with rights violations? And the answer to that is with a market.
Okay, sure. All right. In that case, we may not really have any disagreements then. So my real issue with that, or the reason that I brought this up, is that I would speak with a lot of libertarians or ANCAPs, and their criticism of our current political system would be the idea that rights are violated in it, and that um, would be that rights are violated in it, and you know we can't accept that, right? So we would want to aim for a system where rights are not violated. And my issue was that I couldn't really conceive of any system that could exist without rights being violated, given the issues that I outlined to you. Uh, and given that, even under an ANCAP system, we still, or a libertarian system, or however you want to refer to it, we would still accept that there exist rights violations. It seems like there's no principle reason for us to accept one arbitrary set of rights violations over another arbitrary set of rights violations.
Well, like the point the libertarian makes is not we're not ascribing, okay, this is this system, that's how we're gonna set it up, and there'll be like this like agency X which does Y and Z. We are rejecting every single rights violation that there is, and
Mm.
so therefore we reject the state as a necessary violator of rights. So
Okay.
therefore we have to be anarchists. So we advocate anarchy. And then just whatever will happen will happen. We're not saying that we will ever achieve a world with zero criminals ever. I think that's
Mm.
preposterous. It's just we are always consistent in calling those people out as criminals and saying that that is a bad thing that they're doing that.
Sure, that's fine, but I don't think you would accept it if, for example, we were talking about taxation, and I said I oppose rights violations, but I never want to achieve a world without like rights violations. So I don't really care about people getting taxed, but I will call the people doing the taxing out for violating rights. It seems like if we're willing to just sit back and abide the fact that our system involves rights violations, it seems like it's sort of loses the force that we would wish to use to criticize the current system, right?
I mean, like, I'm not saying I don't want to achieve a world without rights violations. I just don't think it's possible. I'm where you're
Mm.
saying, well, I mean, I don't care that people are getting taxed, but I would contradict what you saying that you do care about rights violations because it's a rights violation, and I would be
Mm.
consistent in my rejection of every rights violation. I'm not sitting back and saying, "Oh well, who cares?" I'm the one who is saying, "Well, that's a bad thing." and we should sort
Okay.
that out.
So if you consistently reject all rights violations, then what is your sort of arithmetic for preferring one system of government over another?
Well, I reject government. I'm an anarchist.
Or one system of social organization over another? Like what would make you look at one society and say it is better or worse than another one?
Well, how much rights are being violated? If I think a society
Okay.
where, only one murder has ever occurred would be better than one where 1,000 murders occur a day.
Okay, so we're kind of like consequentialists then.
No, I'm not a consequentialist.
Oh, okay. Well, so I don't, by consequentialism, I don't mean like consequentialist in terms of well-being, right? Like a consequentialist theory, to my understanding at least, is anyone that takes good or bad to be based off of the gross amount of something, right? So if your belief in what is good or bad is derived from the gross amount of rights violations that occurs, in that case, you would have a consequentialist view on that. So
Um,
does that sort of make sense to you, or do you want to?
sure, I mean, it's a weird way of phrasing it, but it's fine, yes.
Sure.
I would prefer, because I reject all rights violations, I prefer a society which doesn't have as many rights violations to one which has more.
Okay, so in that case, uh, given that we prefer a society without rights violations, with less violations, to one that has more rights violations, it seems like it necessarily follows that we would be justified in violating the rights of few people to make up for protect the rights of many people, to create a society where, on a gross level, less rights are being violated. Correct?
Well, no, because I'm not a liberty utilitarian here, to be specific.
Mhm.
I'm rejecting all rights violations, so I couldn't then go and start violating rights, because I contradict myself. If I'm against rights violations, I cannot violate rights. I would be objectively wrong in arguing that.
Okay. Well, it seems like so that in that case that's kind of confusing to me, because what you've told me is that what makes one society preferable to another is when there are less rights violations rather than more. But now I'm asking you, okay, can we take action to create a society with less rights violations? And you're saying no, we can't violate
Well,
rights at all without it being morally wrong. So now it feels like we're back to just having no way to prefer one society over another
well,
unless
no,
one society contains zero violations.
I can prefer a society A over a society B.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean that I suddenly have to start violating rights to get to A.
Sure, but in that case, if you prefer a society A where people have tons of rights violation, or sorry, if you prefer society A where, say for example, in some like abstract hypothetical, every year we kidnap like 1,000 people off the street and violate their rights somehow, and through some weird voodoo magic that protects like the rights of 100,000 people from being violated. It seems like you would have to prefer that to a society where 100,000 people's rights are violated, just like because of our inaction, right? But
I
it
mean,
seems
I'm
deeply unsatisfying for us to say that
to be
we can
clear,
have some sort of sense.
I'm not having any sort of interpersonal comparison of rights violations. My preference would be entirely subjective in that manner. If there's all sorts of things which might make me prefer society A over B. But the point of being, as a libertarian, I reject all rights violations, and I argue against any sort of rights violation.
Okay. So if that's your personal preference, that's okay. In that case, I would ask the same question of libertarianism. So how would a libertarian prefer one society over another?
Um, a libertarian could prefer a society which adheres to natural law over one which doesn't. They would have to, in fact, or else they wouldn't be a libertarian.
Okay. And so and so in that sense, what would that look like in your eyes?
A society which
that we
adheres to natural law, natural law
Mhm.
being the purpose of it being conflict avoidance, and is basically like the NEP. So all the shit libertarians talk about all the time.
Uh-huh. Okay. So we would prefer a society that like abides by the non-aggression principle or whatever as libertarians.
Yes, but more broadly, natural law, because the non-aggression principle is simply a facet of natural law. It's not all of natural law.
Okay. Sorry, do you mind if I take a second?
Go ahead.
Okay. So when we say abide by, so what would it look like for a society to abide by the non-aggression principle? It's like,
Nobody would aggress.
okay. So bringing that back to sort of the topic of conversation that we brought about. So how would that sort of principle help us in distinguishing the two hypothetical worlds that we talked about? So like libertarian world with no cops or libertarian world with cops. How would that principle help us prefer those over like the status quo?
Because the status quo is per se aggressive, whereas
Mhm.
the libertarian society isn't per se aggressive.
I think wouldn't it be per se aggressive if we have a societal structure where people are allowed to just commit crimes and
No,
there's
they're
no
not
central
allowed.
law enforcement body to
They're
stop
not
them?
allowed to commit crimes, right? Because here's what you're saying,
Well,
right?
it's
It's society.
not that they're
You're comparing the status quo, which by definition contains rights violations. It wouldn't be the status quo if it didn't have rights violations. There's taxation and all sorts going on. It by definition must not adhere to natural law, versus a libertarian society where it might be the case at some point that somebody violates rights, but it's not inherent to the system itself. Those are the
Mhm.
differences. So all other things, I would have to go with the one which adheres to natural law over the one which definitionally doesn't.
Okay. So I don't mean by allowed in the sense that like we're morally permitting it. I mean more so that if you live in a society with no law enforcement, then really there's no leverage against you for committing crimes. We agreed on that earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if what we care about is having a society where people's rights aren't aggressed on, I feel as if the idea that we sit back and allow crimes to occur, but we accept these rights violations because sort of the configuration of society is different.
I'm not accepting any
And
rights violations.
well, sure. I'm not saying that you're accepting those rights violations. I'm saying that the idea that we would prefer this society over another because of the fact that it abides by natural law, right? I feel like the fact that we don't have some sort of government set up does not make the rights violations that we're enduring under our hypothetical any worse or better than the ones that we're enduring under the status quo. I mean, people are still having their rights violated, right?
Well, not necessarily. That's the point I'm making. There isn't necessarily going to be a rights violation in some hypothetical
Sure,
anarchy,
not
right?
not not nec- not like
But there
necessarily in
is
that
necessarily going to be rights violations under the status quo society.
well not really though. Like what
Mm-hmm.
if everybody just consented to taxation? Like I don't think that everybody consenting to taxation is
What's an
any more
oxymoron?
astronomically sorry?
It's an oxymoron, right? You cannot
No,
consent
what if
to theft, right? Because the state, it's defined by it being in
no
the
what if but
anti-productive
what if
sector of the economy.
what if ahead of time everyone just arbitrarily decided that they would give the state whatever money that it asked for, no matter how much it was, and they were just
If
like, yeah,
they
that's fine.
agreed to it, it wouldn't be the state. Let me actually pull up my
Uh-huh.
preferred definition of the state here. So yeah, I'm just gonna plus pure. We can split the economy into two sectors, the productive sector and the anti-productive sector. The productive sector is a sector where goods are attained through homesteading, production, and trade. The anti-productive sector is a sector where goods are attained through expropriation of homesteaders, producers, and traders. Under this framing, I say the state is any group that resides in the anti-productive sector, and rather than being a monopolist by definition, it merely tends to monopoly. If there are competition in expropriation, you'd not expect there to be much left to expropriate. So that's what I'm meaning here. The state is some group which lives in the anti-productive sector of the economy. It has to expropriate by definition, and you cannot consent to crime being done to you. It's oxymoron. It's like how you can't consent to rape, because then it's not rape anymore.
Sure. Okay. So if we live in a world where people are consensually giving their taxes to the state, what do we end up as?
I mean, it wouldn't be
Like
taxes anymore. It would just be a donation.
Okay, so does the state just become some like huge charity at that point?
I guess so.
Okay. Well, so in that case, I think that if we're talking about practical preferences for one world or another, so if we're saying I feel there's no real difference for us to say we have a state where rights violations are necessary versus a libertarian world with no law enforcement where rights violations aren't 100% necessary but virtually guaranteed to occur. I feel like there's no reason for anyone who will live in one of these worlds to prefer one over the other on the grounds of rights violations, just because there's an astronomical chance that if we live in a world with no cops, people just won't commit crime anyways.
But if you're a libertarian, you have to, on principle, reject the one where there is necessary rights violations, or else you wouldn't be a libertarian anymore.
Sure, but I feel like you also have to. Would you not also, on principle, reject the one with an extremely high % chance of people having their rights violated to the extent that it would probably be several orders of magnitude of like different dice rolls that you would need to eventually get to a point in the second world where nobody is committing any crimes?
I mean, that's an entirely empirical matter. What likelihood there is that there will be rights violations in some society? That's empirical, so it lives outside of the principled analysis of natural law that I'm talking about here. And under the principled analysis of the natural law adherence, all you can say is, well, this society, by definition, must violate rights, and this one might not. So we'd have to go with the one which might not.
In that case, it seems like we don't really. It seems like our concerns don't really map onto the world in any practical sense, right? So, say for example, we had a government that collected $1 in taxes or 1 cent in taxes from everyone in society every year, but they did so non-consensually, and they obviously, because of that, they definitely have to violate rights. And say we have another world where every year people roll like a random number generator to generate a number from 1 to 10 billion. And if we get anywhere from 1 to 9, like 9,999,999, like the Gestapo like comes to your house and like steals like all of the money that you have and whatever and blah 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 blah. But if we roll 10 billion, you get left alone like for the rest of time. It would seem like if we're preferring the one that might not have rights violations over the one that necessarily does, we'd be forced to prefer the Gestapo world over the world with the 1 cent in taxation. Would you be okay with that?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I've explained it, because in a natural law, I'm doing a natural law analysis here, which is entirely based in praxeology. I can't look to the world of empiricism and like probabilities and shit like that. I have to look at the concrete. It either is a rights violation or it isn't. If it isn't, then I like it. If it is, then I don't like it.
Okay. So given that we're doing analysis on these lines, would you, in real life, if you were picking a society to live in, would this be the basis on which you picked?
I would probably choose to go to the one with the 1% tax because I imagine I could more quickly annihilate that government than the one which is like a global hegemony which can send in some troops. Actually, let's look at that hypothetical more clearly. It seems to me that in the system it's set up such that there will necessarily have to be this government which is going to be going around and violating rights, right?
In the second one or in the first one?
Yeah, how on earth are they getting this Gestapo together and
Oh,
whatnot?
it's just like a bunch of guys who just like come together, totally decentralized. It's like a co-op.
Okay, I mean,
Yeah, so like not
I'll just leave it alone. I mean, it's
Mhm.
yeah, it's fine as reductio. It's like it's my concern with it is where it's like, well, we're going to be rolling this random number generator rather than I think it would be better to frame that as, well, in this society we postulate that this is the likelihood that uh, the Gestapo would just suddenly decide to form and go to this person's house. I think that
Yeah,
would be the
sure.
better framing rather than having it be, well, here's the rule under this Gestapo law, and we're gonna be spinning this wheel for each person, right? Because that makes it
Yeah,
sound
sure.
like there is still rights violations going on. But yeah, no,
Sure, sure.
in that, yes, I would probably choose to go to the one with the 1 cent tax because I could probably just avoid it anyway. What are we
Okay.
gonna do?
Well, let's let's say if we lived in a world where the 1 cent tax was unavoidable and the idea of taking down that government is completely impractical. Like say it's like this like super powerful like galactic government or whatever that has no real need of money, but like they take like a 1 cent tax as like a symbolic thing, like a pledge of your allegiance or whatever. So if it was not actually viable for that government to be overthrown or for you to avoid the tax at all, would you still prefer that world over the one with the Gestapo?
Yeah, but that's just my personal risk assessment.
Okay. Well, in that case, I'm not really sure on what grounds we should prefer one government over another, right? Because if we can accept that a government violates natural law, but still personally prefer it because of our own personal risk assessment, it seems like I would be totally permitted to say that I accept the status quo despite its violations of natural law because of my personal risk assessment or my own personal opinion of what sort of world I want to live in. Would you accept that if I said that?
No, because you kind of said two different things there. You said, well, we might prefer society A over B on some arbitrary grounds of just subjective preference. So, therefore, what if I say I just accept society A? Well, no, 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 no. We're not saying that we accept, uh, let's say America versus the UK. I'm not saying that I accept the rights violations going on in America. I would just prefer to be in America than in the UK because I
Okay.
foresee that I will have less. I just foresee that it'll be better for me to be there.
Okay.
That's subjective grounds of I just prefer it. Whereas I'm not saying that does not entail that I do not reject those rights violations still.
No, sure. I'm not saying that you have to accept the rights violations. I'm saying that if we're talking about what society we want to live in, it seems acceptable to you at least and to me that we can reject that we can say that rights violations in a society are bad, but still decide to live in that society, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, I mean,
Okay.
there could be like some great Wild West anarchy going on in the US where there's no government, it's ancap and everything's great. But
Hmm.
I might have a sick grandmother at home, so I might prefer to stay in Stasi land to take care of my sick grandmother, right? Because rights
Yeah.
violations are not the only concern which comes into your life.
Sure. Okay. So, in that case, what sort of power should the idea of rights violations have over our like material choices? Like, if what sort of action do you think we should take, given our understanding of like societies and natural law and so on? Or what sort of action do you think we're obligated to take, rather, I should say?
We're not obligated to take any action in the face of rights violations. You're only obligated to not violate rights, right? So there are, associated duties with that if you want to get real pernickety about it. But like, it's
Mm.
not like you have to do this level of praxis, otherwise you're evil. You can basically do shit all in terms of praxis, and you can still be completely in accord with natural law, right? I think people should dedicate a lot of their time and energy into fighting rights violations, into fighting the state. I mean, I'm
But
dead.
it's
I'm
supererogatory. Is that what you're saying?
sorry,
It's like it would be supererogatory to do so. Is that what you're saying?
supererogatory.
Like praiseworthy but not required.
Yes, definitely. And I think if you're serious about libertarianism, you should absolutely try as much as you can to fight the state. Obviously, it's going to still be your choice. I mean, I've made I'm basically dedicating my whole life to fighting the state, and that's just a choice I've made. Other people make different
Okay.
choices, and that's fine.
Okay.
So, do we have anything else to go over? I mean, what actually is your politics? I don't think I got that.
Oh, I'm a nihilist.
Ah, classic. So,
Yeah.
like, just don't care about any, like, you don't
No,
have any system you'd have in mind, like, minarchy or whatever.
No, I don't strongly believe in any real political project because I don't think that like epistemologically I have access to the level of information I would need to make that decision.
Okay, yeah, no, I can't be bothered to go in. I mean, yeah, I suppose if you're not a political nihilist, it's not per se a contradiction. But I mean, it does seem that you're a little bit political, considering that you're engaging in political debate, right?
Sure.
If
Yeah.
nothing matters, why bother?
Yeah. I don't really do this for like to like promote an ideology or something. I think it's mostly just to have fun.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Did you have anything else you wanted to go over?
No, I think we're pretty much okay.
Yeah, cool.
Okay. Cheers.
See ya. Getting a lot of short ones recently. Oh, present Sunday on Saturday, I think. That one should be a lot longer. Yeah. See you guys.